A kendo mask appears in the darkness as a person screams out for anyone out there to help him get out of the dark place he's trapped in. In the boys' bathroom, a frail kid stands with his shirt off, with something in his mouth while four more boys stand in front of him, with one of them holding a kendo stick in his hand, and says that if he doesn't spit out the thing in his mouth while he stabs him 10 times, then he'll give his uniform back to him, else he won't. With snot coming out of his nose and tears flowing out of his eyes, the boy stands there panting, with a toy in his mouth, and his bullies mock him for not being able to answer as he can't talk with the toy in his mouth. The bully with the kendo stick says out loud that it's his turn and stabs the boy with his kendo stick right in the middle of a circled spot. The boy loudly grunts in pain as he gets stabbed by the sword, with tears coming out of his eyes, snot from his nose, and saliva from his mouth. Snickering at the boy's helpless self, they mock how high his endurance is, while the one holding the kendo stick says that it's because he's stabbing him weakly. Standing mysteriously in the corner, another boy tells them to hand him the stick. Looking back at him, one of them says how a real kendo player is stepping up just to bully someone weak. He then also asks if it would be called attempted murder if he were to stab him being a kendo player. This kid who's being bullied, his name is Sun Han Gyul, the real kendo player bully, grabs him by his hair and calls out to him, first by his name, then he calls him by his nickname that they gave him, that is, King Pushover. Han Gyul trembles in fear. Tears flow out his eyes like a river, as the bully tells him that after today, it'll be over between them both, and that for the 3 years they were together in the same school, he had fun playing with him. With a grin on his face, he says how sad he is that he won't be able to play with him anymore. He then tells him to think of the incoming stab as a commemorative gift to help him remember their friendship forever even after graduation. The bully then congratulates him for graduating with a pop sound and hits him in the solar plexus with the handle of the kendo stick. Han Gyul suddenly falls to the ground right by the bully's feet while coughing and gasping for air. The toy has now been ejected out of his mouth. It lies on the floor covered in his saliva. The other bullies then turn to face the one who just hit Han Gyul, while one of them exclaims how much of a difference a kendo player can make in comparison to someone who isn't a kendo player, while the other one looks at his in worry and confusion on seeing him standing there silently. Standing in front of the kneeling Han Gyul, the bully stares into his hand, with spit on his chin as he curses and says how disgusting it is. With a furious look in his eyes, the bully looks at Han Gyul angrily and tells him that he was going to end it moderately since it's the graduation day today, but he isn't in the mood for that anymore. Scared from seeing his angered expression, Han Gyul rushes to grab the toy spit out while he apologizes to his bully, Gyeongtae, saying that he'll do it again and that he can stab him for as long as he wants until he feels better. Cursing at him, Gyeongtae kicks the toy away from him and it breaks on impact with something solid that it hits, as he curses at him saying that he's dead meat today. Holding his kendo stick up in a striking position, he curses at him once more, calling him a pushover bastard. He prepares himself to hit him with his kendo stick. The attack then lands on the back of Han Gyul's head. Standing behind Gyeongtae, the other bullies talk amongst themselves. One of them says that how Han Gyul might get beaten to death this way and what they would do if his mom reports this as school violence. Speaking up, the other one smirks at his friend's direction and says that the school violence committee would have had already convened if he got beaten and stabbed that much. Looking at the crying Han Gyul, he then says that he's called King Pushover for a proper reason. Trying to open his eyes while he continues to get beaten like a dog, Han Gyul thinks to himself that he just needs to endure today and nothing more, just until today, and finally, he will never have to face them again. Back in his house, Han Gyul stands below his shower and tries to run off the markings his bullies made on his body while asking himself if they used permanent marker, as it doesn't seem to coming off at all, while he curses them as they always just beat him up while drawing these graffiti on him. With tears flowing out of his eyes, just a river and snot flowing down his nose, he begs for those markings to come off his body. He then whimperingly grunts and cries while standing in front of the mirror. 1 month later, Han Gyul is sitting in his new classroom while the other children around him continue to chatter amongst themselves. Looking down at his desk, he thinks to himself how surprisingly the other students are seemingly getting closer to each other and how nice it is in comparison to how it was in his middle school. Suddenly, a person greets him, which makes him look up at that person. The person who called out to him is a guy named Choi Jin-seo. He introduces himself, and so does Han Gyul. Jin-seo then tells him that he went to Wantong Middle School and asks him what middle he went to. With a bright look on his face, Han Gyul says that he went to Guan Yu Middle School. Hearing that, Jin Seo says that they should get along well as they seem to be sitting next to each other. Seeing him respond so properly, Han Gyul thinks to himself as how his new friend seems to have a really bright personality. With a bright, cheerful look on his face, he asks him if there is that place near Gwon-yu Middle School with a really delicious tteokbokki. Replying normally, Han Gyul says that the place he is talking about is gone, and that place has been changed to a cafe. Jin Seo excitedly asks him if it is true. And as to when that happened, suddenly, a loud voice curses at how noisy it is. Their eyes then fall on the guy with brown spiky hair, sitting near the window who cussed at how noisy the classroom is. Looking at Han Gyul and Jin Seo, he curses at them while blaming them as how everybody's been chattering since morning, not letting him sleep for even a moment. Hearing him complain so angrily, they both look down in fear. Scared that history might repeat itself, Han Gyul thinks to himself that he should have just stayed quiet and does his best to not make any eye contact. The brown-haired guy then stands up and looks at his direction. He then calls out to Han Gyul. As Han Gyul doesn't answer, he walks up to him asking as to why he's not answering. Han Gyul's heart starts beating loudly as he thinks to himself that if he were to get marked as a pushover from the beginning of the semester, then it'll be the end of everything he thought would be different than his middle school life. He then suddenly closes his eyes, bracing himself for the impact that will shatter his hope of a new start in life, while thinking to himself how he can even escape from this situation. Han Gyul sits there, wide-eyed, shocked that the one to get chosen to be bullied isn't him but Jin Seo, his new friend. He looks at the bully grabbing Jin Seo by his neck as he tells him that he should answer right away whenever he calls him. With a slightly relieved yet worried and confused expression, Han Gyul thinks to himself if that wasn't him the bully was calling out to. Holding Jin Seo's neck fat, the bully mocks him, saying how having such thick neck muscles might be the reason why he has a loud voice. With a whimpering expression, Jin Seo apologizes, saying that he will be careful to not talk so loudly from then on. Seeing him apologize so easily, the bully curses at him, saying how he is being cocky. The bully then looks back at Han Gyul with a pissed-off expression and asks him if he's got something to say to him as he is still looking at him. Bowing his head down in fear, trying not to make eye contact with the bully, Han Gyul denies his question, saying that he doesn't. The bully then pulls Jin Seo by his hair, telling him to follow him as he calls him a pig bastard. As Jin Seo mentions how it hurts being pulled by his hair, the bully irritatedly tells him to stop being so dramatic and quietly follow him. Sitting in his seat as his whole existence trembles in fear, he thinks to himself to not look back, and if he were to just stay still, he'll be fine, and that there's no way someone like him can help. Even if he tried, he suddenly starts thinking positively how it's fine, as long as it's not him being bullied and that he has finally escaped this time. As time passes by, he sees Jin Seo getting made fun of and looks away, thinking to himself that it's fine, as long as it's not him. Another day, he sees the bully pouring milk over Jin Seo and walks away, thinking to himself that it's fine, as long as it's not him. Someday he sees Jin Seo getting kicked while being covered by a bucket. He sees that and ignores it all while thinking to himself that it's fine, as long as it's not him that getting bullied. One day, while sitting in his classroom, he sees Jin Seo getting kicked half naked and sits there on his seat while looking at them. Looking at Jin Seo's face as he gets kicked, he thinks to himself of the time he was getting bullied during his middle school years. Turning his head back, he addresses Jin Seo in his mind, as he apologizes to him, saying how no one can help him, as he too was treated the same way in middle school. Another day has come to a pass, and school is currently over, and Han Gyul is walking towards the school gate when suddenly a voice calls out to him. It's the sports coach. He hands out a net full of balls to Han Gyul and tells him to take this back to the equipment room, to which Han Gyul agrees to. Han Gyul then takes the net full of balls and finally enters the equipment room. As he enters, he gruntingly complains how dusty it is. As he puts it on a shelf, he suddenly hears a voice calling out to him, telling him to get it out. Looking in the direction he heard the voice from, he finds a kendo headgear stuck under a pile of rubbish as he tells himself how he might have heard a sound from around here. He suddenly gets startled by a person entering the equipment room while cursing at someone. It's the bully who's holding Jin Seo by his neck as they enter. He then says how he's been too lenient with him lately. Whimperingly, Jin Seo denies that fact and says that it's not like how he thinks it to be. Hearing their voices, Han Gyul instinctively hides. The bully then suddenly throws Jin Seo on the ground. As Han Gyul hides in the darkness, he covers up his mouth to not let any sound out. He hears the bully asks him if he remembers him telling him to bring money, even if he had to sell his fat for that. Stutteringly, Jin Seo says that he did tell him to do that. The bully then yells at him asking if he heard him well, then why he deliberately didn't bring it. He then asks him again if it's because he's a pig bastard, that he can't understand human words, all while Han Gyul tries to sneak a peek at them while hiding. With eyes that are about to burst into tears from fear, Jin Seo says that he doesn't have any money and what he gave him before was all of the allowance he got for the current month. The bully then grabs him by his hair and forces his head towards the floor as he once again calls him a pig bastard, while Jin Seo screams in pain from having his hair getting pulled. With his eyes closed, snot coming out of his nose and worry showing on his face, he stutteringly says that he is not lying and that he wants to give it too, but he can't give something he doesn't have. Suddenly, with a click sound, a stapler pin flies by his eyes as he stares at the floor blankly as he realizes what that clicking sound was from. Holding the stapler in his hand as another pin flies off, he asks him if he's saying that he's willing to pay with his body. With an evil smile forming on his face, the bully swirls his tongue around his lower lips and says that if he doesn't scream while he stabs him 5 steel stapler pins, then he'll specially forgive him just this once, while Jin Seo looks up at him with a terrified expression on his face. As the bully puts the stapler on the back of his chubby neck, scared out of his wits by what is happening to him, Jin Seo screams at first as the cold metal touches his bare skin and calls out to him and begs for him to forgive him. This bully's name is Su Cheol, and currently as Jin Seo realizes what's about to happen to him, he speaks up with a horrified expression on his face as he begs to Su Cheol to forgive him. He then tells him that he will even steal from his mom's wallet and bring him the money if needed, and begs him to let him go. Swirling around his tongue, Su Cheol tells him that saying that now wouldn't get him anywhere and that he should just first take the punishment and then he'll think about the money he'll receive from him. Mustering up all his courage, Han Gyul finally makes an appearance as he calls out to Su Cheol as he continues to bully Jin Seo, making them both look up at his mysterious entrance. Clenching his fists, he musters up all the courage he could and curses at Su Cheol, telling him to stop the baseless bullying. Han Gyul stands there looking at them through the mysterious kendo headgear that he's wearing to hide his identity from Su Cheol, he thinks to himself, as to what the hell he is trying to do by interfering like this after how he ignored it all this time, all while telling himself that it's fine, as long as it's not him getting bullied. Annoyed by Han Gyul's sudden, mysterious entrance, he holds Jin Seo off by his head as he stands up and asks him as to who he is. Walking towards the masked Han Gyul, he asks him to take that mask off his face if he doesn't want to die, while Jin Seo kneels there grunting in pain and fear. Suddenly, Jin Seo starts coughing and vomits his own spit, while even choking on it. Looking at his condition, Su Cheol irritatedly says how this situation is really ridiculous and that it can't get any more ridiculous. Seeing his chance, Han Gyul dashes at Su Cheol and throws his body at him and pushes him off his feet. As he falls to the floor on his back, Han Gyul runs out of the equipment room without a moment to even look back. Sitting there on the floor, he looks back at the mysterious masked guy with gritted teeth. As he runs off, he yells out saying that he's dead the moment he catches him. Without even looking back, Han Gyul continues to run at his full speed while the bully starts to chase him. Panting through the kendo headgear, he thinks to himself how he screwed up his peaceful life just because it felt wrong seeing his friend suffering like that, and he then asks himself as to what he should do to save himself against the bull chasing him. In the Wang Rim Kendo Dojo, the students stand there in front of a person saying that there was supposed to be a new coach coming. The person they're talking to is their history teacher. He tells them that due to school circumstances, it's difficult to bring in a new coach, and that he has decided to take charge for the time being. The tallest and the most mature-looking amongst the students speaks, asking the teacher if he can come by the spring tournament. Hesitantly, the teacher says that he will try his best to. Walking towards the door, the teacher tells them that they should continue training as they have been and to come find him if anything happens that needs his assistance. With an irritated expression on his face, a third-year student, Young Gi-yeon, complains, saying as to what kind of bullshit their school is trying to pull on them, as how the school is just telling them to continue with their training without a coach while the spring tournament is right around the corner. Hesitatingly, another student who is a second year, Jo Jun-young, speaks up mentioning how the school might eventually suggest abolishing the kendo club. Hearing that Ji-yeon turns his head towards him with gritted teeth as he tells him to shut his mouth. In a scolding tone, he asks Jun-young if he's crazy for trying to say something so unlucky. Looking down, Jun-young apologizes for saying what he said. He adds up, saying that though he's sorry for what he said, he still thinks he didn't say something that's impossible. Suddenly, another student, a third year, Mying Dong-uk, speaks up saying how they all knew that the kendo club support was declining, and also that their coach Ha was leaving for another school. One of the other second years, Song Hae-in, turns to their captain and asks him as to what he is going to do. This person is the kendo club captain, a third year too, Young Jae-seok. He turns his head towards the other kendo club members and asks them if there is anyone who would quit kendo just because there's no coach to teach them. In an agitated tone, they ask him as to what he is talking about, and they add up, saying that none of them would even think of that. With a firm expression on his face, he says that he'll go and talk to the school again and that for now they should just focus on preparing for the spring tournament. Ji-yeon then calls out to Jun-young, telling him to follow him into a spar, saying that if they were to win, then the school might even change their mind about the kendo club. Jun-young follows him. Walking behind them, Dong-uk comments as to how nice it must be being so simple-minded. Jae-seok and Hae-in stand there looking at the other members as they continue to bicker amongst themselves. Hae-in suddenly turns her head towards Jae-seok and tells him that they first need to fill in the lacking members to participate in the tournament. Wearing a blank expression on his face, Jae-seok says that there's still time until the tournament and for now, and he's suddenly cut off in between his sentences as Han Gyeol, wearing his kendo headgear, suddenly slams open the dojo's door. Surprised by the mysterious appearance of a masked student, they turn their gazes towards him. As Han Gyeol finally gets a chance to catch his breath, Sucheol suddenly enters through the entrance while panting. He says how it isn't a good thing to make people so tired. Sucheol angrily walks towards Han Gyeol, asking him if he is a member of the kendo club, and while cursing at him, he tells him to show him his face if he doesn't want to die. Sucheol rushes his hand to grab his mask and take it off. Seeing that his face might get revealed, Han Gyeol covers up his face with his hand. To his surprise, the kendo club's captain, Jae-seok, comes to his rescue and grabs Sucheol by his wrist, stopping him from grabbing Han Gyeol's mask. With an arrogant look on his face, Sucheol orders the person who suddenly grabbed his wrist to let go of it. As Jae-seok maintains his firm grip on Sucheol's wrist, he looks him in the eye and tells him how not just anyone can enter the kendo hall and asks him to get out of here. Tightening his grip on his wrist, Jae-seok tells him that he should show some respect to his senior as a first year. Grunting through the pain of having his wrist gripped so tightly, he tells him that he'll just take the masked guy and leave. Holding him off by his wrist, Jae-seok then turns to face the masked Han Gyeol and tells him to just take the back door inside the kendo hall to go out. With a furious look in his eyes, he looks at the masked Han Gyeol and tells him to stop right where he is, and as Jae-seok tightens his grip, he cries out, begging him to let go of his wrist. Holding his shoes in one hand, Han Gyeol jogs through the kendo hall to the back door as he apologizes for his sudden intrusion. As the masked Han Gyeol has left, Jae-seok throws him out of the kendo hall and warns him by saying that the next time he sees him lurking around the kendo hall, it won't end with just his wrist. Sucheol, gritting his teeth as he trembles in pain and fury from having his wrist squeezed hard, cusses him out in his mind as he sits there on the ground, pissed off. Far away from the school, Han Gyeol is sitting on a bench as he talks to himself in panic as to why he did that act of bravery and what would have happened to him if he had gotten caught by Sucheol. He sits there holding his head. He asks himself if the bully would still recognize him even after he covered his face up with the kendo mask. He then assures himself saying that the bully doesn't even know his name. Suddenly he goes into panic while saying that there's a chance that he might somehow recognize him. Suddenly, he gets startled on hearing the same voice telling him to get it out that he heard the moment he entered the kendo hall. Surprised as to where that voice came from, he looks around in confusion. He then once again hears the voice telling him to get it out, and he finally notices the voice coming from the mysterious kendo mask that he picked up from the equipment room. Holding the kendo mask in his hands right in front of his face, he says how it seems that the voice is coming from the mask. The mask then suddenly lights up in a sky blue color in front of eyes. Letting out a sigh of relief, the mask speaks up, saying he thought that he was going to suffocate to death. Terrified from seeing a mask talk, startled, Han Gyeol instinctively jumps backward. Drying off his head with a towel, Dong-uk comes out of the dojo saying that it's nice how the shower room is more comfortable with fewer members. Looking at him, Gi-yeon asks him if he's happy that the club has fewer members. Even if he's trying to joke, rubbing his hair with the towel as he walks towards Gi-yeon, he says how he couldn't even wash his hair properly when there were many members in the club. With a mocking expression on his face, he says that Ji-yeon wouldn't understand even if he tried to. As he's bald, irritated by his remark, Ji-yeon annoyedly says that he isn't bald and that he's just got a buzz cut. Ooh. Looking at them bickering like children, Hae-in mentions how it's twice as hard to train without a coach overlooking them. Looking at them, Jae-seok says that it would be good if they took turns checking the overall training. He then asks if there were any new students joining them. With a disappointed look on her face, she says that though they posted recruitment notices, no one has contacted them regarding it. Looking at the three, Jae-seok says that they will have to keep waiting if that's the case. Suddenly, Jun-young speaks up, asking what if they asked the kid wearing the kendo mask they saw earlier. Putting his hand on his shoulder, Gi-yeon asks him if he thinks kendo is a joke to him, as he seems to be trying to pick anyone without even knowing who they are. Replying to his question, Jun-young says that it's because it's so frustrating and that the kid might even have some kendo experience. Holding up a charming smile, Dong-ok asks Gi-yeon if he's scared that the kid might even be better than him. Pissed off at his questions, he reacts irritatedly, saying he's not scared of some puny kid at all. Looking at them continue bickering, Hae-in says that they surely need a coach more than new members. Following her words, Jae-suk says that the school said they would look into it and that they can only wait for good news. Back to Han-gyul, he yells out saying that it's a ghost possessing the mask and throws it and falls to the ground on his back. Lying there on the ground, the kendo mask greets him, saying how it's been a whole 18 years since he met someone who heard his voice and responded. Hiding behind the bench he was sitting on, wearing a confused and scared expression on his face, he asks himself as to why the mask is talking like a living human being, and that such a feat is impossible. Lying there on the ground, the mask tells him to not be scared as he, too, used to be a human once upon a time. He then politely asks him if he can help stand him up properly. Hearing him talk and ask for help, Han-gyul just stays there in front of him, unresponsive, as he simply just stares at him from behind the bench. Irritated by his hesitant behavior, he yells at him, telling him to hurry up and stand him up properly. Putting the mask in a straightened stance on the bench in front of him, he stands there as the mask introduces himself as the greatest kendo player Korea has ever produced. He then continues, saying how that's not enough for an explanation and that he is the Sword King, the man who was called the King of Kendo, Han Seong. He adds up saying that despite his honorable past, he's currently being treated as a ghost rather than a Sword King. Han-gyul suddenly slaps himself, as if finds it hard to believe that he's standing there listening to a mysterious kendo mask that he found in his school's equipment room speaking like a human being. Holding his cheek, Han-gyul mentions how it hurts. As a reply, the mask says that it'll surely even hurt in a dream if he were to hit himself that hard. He then nonchalantly tells him that he needs to borrow his body. Holding his cheek, he asks him as to why he needs his body. Replying to him, the mask says that it is because he was the one who listened to his voice. With an annoyed tone, he asks him as to why Hev has been speaking to him casually this whole time, and he then tells him that if he were alive, he would be old enough to be his father. Without wasting further time on useless chatter, he moves on to the important part, and with a strong voice, full of confidence, he asks him to become the Kendo King with him. With a confused look on his face, he asks the mask what he means by asking him to become the Kendo King with him. Han Seong then tells him that even if he doesn't have the ideal physical conditions for Kendo, but if he had the courage he showed in the storage room that time, then it's not totally impossible for him. Thinking back to the moment when he stood up for Jin Seo while wearing that mask, Han Gyul apologizes for his actions at that time, saying that it wasn't meant to happen and that it was just a mistake on his part. With a worried and panicked expression on his face, he continues saying that it just happened in the moment when he went crazy and made that mistake and that he doesn't exactly have the courage or anything like that in him. Calmly, Han Song says that it doesn't matter even if it was a mistake. The only thing that matters is the fact that he took action to protect someone is what's amazing. Looking at his confused, hesitant expression, he says that if he were to lend him his body, then he would lend him his strength too, and that from this moment on, no matter whoever his opponent is, he'll never have to run away. Without a second thought, Han Gyul simply denies his offer, saying that he doesn't need it. Hearing that, Han Seong calmly questions him as to what he is trying to say. Looking at the floor, he says how he just barely escaped from being a pushover and that he doesn't want to stand out for no reason. He then says how he just wants to go unnoticed. Hearing that, With a disappointed expression on his face, Han Song says if he's trying to say that he's going to live his life running away when things start to get scary. He then asks him for how long he thinks he can live like that, and he then makes a bold statement saying how his parents didn't give birth to him just so he could live like a coward. Hearing those words, like a coward, suddenly hits him right where it would hurt the most. He then thinks back of the times when he looked away like a coward while his first ever high school friend was getting bullied like a dog. In an angered tone, he asks him as to what he even knows what he has been through till now. Looking down at the ground, he tells him not to speak so easily about it if he has never experienced it himself ever in his life. Han Song then speaks in a normal tone and apologizes for saying some things he shouldn't have, and he then tells him that there's nothing he can do to help him if that's what he thinks. The Kendo Club members are currently in a restaurant having a meal after their practice session. Sitting there beside Ji-yeon, Dong-ok turns towards the owner and thanks him for the meal. As a reply, the owner tells them to eat well. While chewing on his sausage, he asks if they really will be able to find themselves a coach in time, and he then disappointedly asks if there is anyone who would even want to come to Wong Rim High's Kendo Club. Hearing that, Ji-yeon replies with his mouth full of food that they'll definitely find a coach in time. Standing up while arguing with food in his chopstick, he mentions how their Wong Rim Kendo Club has a 40-year tradition. Holding up a fried shrimp in his fork, Junyoung adds up with Gi-yeon's statement saying how a world championship winner is also from their school. With his mouth filled with food, Gi-yeon speaks up once again. First commending Junyoung for holding up a point, and then he asks as to why the support of the Kendo Club in this state when the world championship winner is the chairman of the board. Jae-seok then suddenly notices Hae-in out down her chopstick right in the middle, while her plate isn't empty yet. Silently, Hae-in looks down at the table with a blank expression on her face. Back to Han Gyul. While walking back to his home, he thinks to himself as to what he should do about this kendo mask he just brought back with him, and that he can't seem to find a proper place to throw it away at all. Holding the mask in his hands, he then calls out to Han Song. Before he could say or ask anything, Han Song suddenly apologizes for what he said about his parents earlier and that he can clearly see his future, and it just frustrated him that he's just going to live getting beaten up without ever trying to fight back at all. After hearing what he said, Han Gyul just stops near a house and puts the mask straight down on a pedestal. He then tells him how he has bad memories that come up just from seeing a bamboo sword. He then suddenly pulls his shirt up a bit and shows him the scar right beside his belly button. While holding his shirt up, he tells him that these are the scars from middle school, and these scars are from being stabbed and getting beaten with bamboo swords for 3 years by delinquents who were in the Kendo Club. In a gentle and apologetic tone, Han Seong says that he didn't know such a thing happened to him, and tells him that he won't ask more about what happened, but he then also mentions how the ones who saved him today were also from the Kendo Club. Han Gyul has now returned to his home and is lying on his bed while he stares at the kendo mask as he remembers the word he said about him not having to run away anymore no matter who he ends up facing. He then turns over and murmurs saying that it isn't some manga, that he can just mysteriously acquire some greater strength just because a mask tells him so. He then soon falls asleep. Han Gyul wakes up early and comes to his school's equipment room in order to put back the mask in its place. Seeing that no one is there in the equipment, he walks deeper into it to place the kendo mask somewhere proper. He then puts the mask on a carton and apologizes to him for not being able to help him out. Suddenly, he hears the door to the equipment room click open. Standing in front of the open door is Soo Cheol with another boy walking behind him. He then enters while cursing the kendo mask. As he walks in, he says how he will definitely catch whoever it was behind that kendo mask and beat him up to pulp, while the boy behind him lightly mocks him for how he doesn't even know the face behind that kendo mask. While searching for something on the shelf, the boy mentions how that person might be from the kendo club as he was wearing a kendo helmet. Soo Cheol then thinks back to the time when the kendo club captain stopped him in his tracks. He then says how even the kendo club guys looked like they were seeing that masked person for the first time. While searching through a carton, the boy then asks him if he should tell him something interesting that he heard of. Hearing that, Soo Cheol asks him what he has to say. As Soo Cheol stands there holding his wrist, the boy says that the guys that graduated from their school said that even most third years can't mess with the kendo club, and that it's pretty common knowledge to know, and also that it's good for your mental health to not mess with kids who do sports. While kicking the shelf in front of him, Soo Cheol angrily yells out saying how those kendo club guys are nothing without their sticks. Seeing that, the boy mocks him with a straight face for trying to take his anger out in the wrong place. As Soo Cheol keeps kicking the shelf, Han Gyul, who's currently sitting behind that self, covers up his mouth with his hands to not let out even a squeak, else his whole life might once again fall apart because of his one single mistake. Seeing him rage so mindlessly, the boy tells him to calm down, pissed off. Sucheol asks him if wants to get hit by him, and he then tells him to shut up and look for cigarettes. With a slightly worried look on his face, the boy tells him that Park Sung must have hidden them somewhere else to keep them safe from anyone's eyes. As Sucheol angrily walks off by himself, the boy follows him saying that they should go together. As they both finally leave, Han Gyeol finally lets out a sigh of relief yet still worried. Riding in a car is Song Hae-in sitting there silently beside her father. She suddenly turns her head towards her father and calls out to him saying that she has a favor to ask of him. Her father turns her head towards her, facing her. He says how it's unusual for her to actually ask for a favor. Then with a gentle smile on his face, he asks her as to what it is that she wants to ask the favor for. Maintaining the blank expression on her face, she requests him to hire a new coach for their kendo club. With a concerned and thoughtful look on his face, he tells her that the coach position hasn't been decided yet, and that the coach position can't remain vacant as the spring tournament is right around the corner. He then tells her to not worry much as he, her father, is the chairman of the board and that he'll do his best to solve this problem for her. Looking forward with a straight, expressionless face, she expresses her gratitude towards him, thanking him for agreeing to help her out. With a slightly sorrowful expression on his face, he wishes if she were to just think of him a bit more comfortably and that she doesn't always have to be so formal with him every time. Turning her face towards the window, she looks out and says that she will try to work on that. With an understanding expression on his face, he says that he understands and will surely wait for her to come around. Hey! In then suddenly tells the driver to stop the car, saying that she will get off at the location they're currently in. As Hae-in stands out of the car with the door open, her father tells her to just ride with him to the school today as it's pretty early and that no one will be watching as they enter the premises. She just tells him that this way is more comfortable for her. As the car leaves, her father dials in a number and calls them while saying just how stubborn she is. He's currently on a call with the principal of her school, with a sly smile on his face. He tells him that there will be no more coach hiring for the kendo club and to stop the process at once, and that the kendo club will soon be disbanded as scheduled. Standing in the school's corridor, the principal respectfully agrees with what Hae-in's father wishes for and says that they've thoroughly prepared for what wishes to happen. Running away from the equipment room, Han Gyeol thinks to himself that he shouldn't go near the storage room anymore if he wants to stay away from Sucheol's mess. He then suddenly hears some weird noises coming from the kendo dojo on the school premises while he was running. He decides to sneak a peek through the window and thinks to himself how everyone is training intensely as the first thing in the morning and how amazing they all look training like that. With an amazed expression on his face, he says how cool they all are. School has now started and Han Gyeol is sitting at his desk silently without anyone to talk to while looking at the seat in front of his where Jin Seo sits. He then thinks to himself how he has never missed a day of school yet, and then if Jin Seo got hurt badly as he's absent. Sitting on his seat surrounded by his lackeys, Sucheol asks, why is Lee Chung not coming already and that he's starving to death? Sitting there in front of him, one of his lackeys says how Lee Chung is a tailender and that he said that he will come after smoking one. He then laughingly says how Lee Chung went in a hurry, saying how he couldn't smoke in the morning. The lackey standing behind Sucheol says that he did tell him to switch to e-cigarettes like him that don't smell. As Han Gyeol is just sitting on his seat quietly, minding his own business, suddenly a slider comes flying at him and hits him in the head. The slider belongs to Sucheol. As Han Gyeol turns his head towards them, he orders him to go to the store and buy some bread for them. Sitting there on his seat, he says that Jin Seo, aka Neckmeat, skipped school, and as he's friends with him and as they're asking him nicely, he should just go and buy some bread for them. Fidgetingly, Han Gyeol tells them that he'll do it and asks if they would give him some money to buy those breads. With an annoyed tone, Sucheol asks him if he doesn't understand what asking nicely means. Scared by his annoyed expression, Han Gyeol runs out of the class in panic, saying that he will buy it for them right away. With an irritated expression on his face, he tells one of his lackeys to stop laughing and go pick up his indoor shoes. Without saying anything much further, he goes up to pick up his sliders and suddenly, Han Gyeol's bag catches his attention for some reason. He then holds up his bag, mocking how even beggars would be too embarrassed to carry this, and he then calls his tacky for having flowered patches stitched onto it. The other lackey then mockingly says if he even has any money to buy them those breads. Surprisingly, Sucheol tells him to bring his bag over to him. While running through the hall, Han Gyul thinks to himself as to what does Su Cheol likes. If it chocolate milk or something else, and if he knew it might happen to him someday, he would have had at least paid some attention to what Jin Seo bought for him. He further says that it's a good thing that he got allowance today. With a panicked expression on his face, he thinks to himself how he thought he might have escaped his fate of being bullied only to end up like that again. Putting a stop to his thoughts, he starts running again, deciding that it's better for him to just hurry up and buy them those breads and to not needlessly provoke them. In the principal's office, the history teacher stands there as the principal tells how the kendo club's friendly match has been decided, and to relay it to the kids so that they understand, and then he can just go out and take care of his own business. After listening to everything the principal said, he just normally says that he understands. With a sorrowful expression on his face, the history teacher comes out of the principal's office and lets out a heavy sigh. And finally, Han Gyul comes back with those breads, panting. To his surprise, he finds that Su Cheol and his group aren't in the classroom anymore. As he holds the polythene bag, he suddenly gets a message on his phone. To his surprise, the message is from Su Cheol. The message tells him to come to the rooftop within 10 seconds. After seeing that text, Han Gyul rushes up the stairs to the roof. As he enters the roof while breathing heavily, the bullies are leisurely on the spare benches on the roof as they complain how long it took him just to get them those breads, while one of them exaggerates how he's dying of hunger from waiting for so long. Han Gyul then runs towards them while he apologizes for being slow and late. He then hands out the polythene bag with the food in it to them, saying that almost everything was sold out there, so he just bought whatever he could find, and while saying so, he suddenly notices something in the corner of his eyes. What he suddenly noticed in the corner of his eyes was his own bag lying by the wall. With a ghastly expression on his face, he looks at his bag and thinks to himself as to what it is doing up here. Holding up his bag, Su Cheol says how he ran into some asshole the previous day and that he also had this same bag on his back. He then asks him if he's that person he ran into. As Han Gyul stutteringly denies that it wasn't him, Su Cheol tells him to put his bag on so that he can check if he's wrong. Hearing that, Han Gyul just stands confused. With an annoyed expression and tone, Su Cheol tells him to put it on as he said if he doesn't want to die. Worried about what he might do, Han Gyul listens to him and puts his bag on. As Han Gyul puts his bag on, Su Cheol starts circling around him. Circling around him, he talks to himself asking if it's the same or if it is not, while Han Gyul just stands there silently panicking. Looking away in panic that he might get caught, he asks him if that is all and if he can go. Suddenly, a kendo mask falls on his head. With an ominous grin on his face, he says that it is indeed similar to the guy who he ran into. He then obnoxiously greets him. Looking at him, Su Cheol then commends him for his acting and mentions that nobody would have thought that something like this was even possible. Suddenly, one of his lackeys speaks up, saying that they found this mask in the storage room while they were waiting for him. With a grin on his face, Su Cheol then asks him while pushing down on the kendo mask if he knows what happens to children who lie. Struggling against Su Cheol, Han Gyul says that it wasn't him. He then bends a bit to match his height to his and mockingly asks him to say that it's enough like the exact way he said it the previous day. Han Gyul's eyes start to look lifeless and he realizes that he has been caught. He continues to panic as Su Cheol obnoxiously asks him if he wants him to stop. To one of the classrooms where Jae-suk is currently sitting quietly while scribbling in his notebook, thinking to himself that even if Do-hyun were to return, they would still be 2 participants short for the team competition, and that they need to come up with something or they will definitely lose. Thinking to himself, he mentions that groups of 7 people of the same gender are allowed to participate in the team competition in high school. He then continues that if there are not enough participants, then the group size can be reduced by half. That is, at least 4 people are required, and in this current case, the missing participants are automatically counted as losers. With a hand on his chin, he talks to himself asking if it is actually time that they look for some new members who would be interested to join their kendo club. As he does so, suddenly a fellow student calls him. She tells him that the history teacher is looking for him. He then asks her if he wants to see him right this moment. As a reply, she tells him that he told her to tell him that he should come to him as soon as she tells him about it. He then walks up and goes to the faculty room and enters it. Standing in front of their history teacher, he asks him if he was looking for him. The teacher then says that he was and that he has some news for him. Looking down with a disappointed expression on his face, he says that the school has given them permission to play a friendly match. Looking at the paper in his hand, he adjusts his glasses and tells him that their opponents would be the Songnam High School Kendo team. With a surprised look on his face, he thinks to himself if the teacher is trying to make a joke or if he is actually serious that they are going to have a match against the Songnam High School, who is the champion of all national tournaments from last year. Without asking anything further, he then tells him that he understands and that they will start preparing for the upcoming match from that day itself. The teacher then tells him to give it their best. With a hesitant tone and expression, he fidgets with his glasses a bit before he breaks the ice and tells him that there is another piece of news that he has for him. Back to Han Gyeol, he has been pushed towards a bunch of benches and collides with them while screaming. With a slider missing, Han Gyeol lies there grunting in pain from colliding with those benches. Holding a pipe in his hand, Soo Cheol slowly advances towards the trembling Han Gyeol as he mockingly asks him if he is finally awake. With a mockingly joyous grin on his face, he asks him if being a hero is that much fun, and that he should have thought about it before pulling that idiotic move on him in the storage room. He then asks him as to why he tried to stand up for Jin Seo. He then pokes him with that pipe as Han Gyeol trembles in fear. He asks him if it was because he felt sorry for him for getting bullied like that. With a pissed-off expression on his face, he asks him if it is because he decided that losers like them should stick together. Closing in on him with a mockingly joyous grin on his face, he tells him that he is a freak like Jin Seo, and then, in a mocking tone, he asks him if his mom gave birth to him like that. He then asks him if he knows that it's hereditary, and then he badmouths his mother calling her ugly, while Han Gyeol sits there with panic clearly visible on his face as his eyes continue looking lifeless. Suddenly, in a fit of rage, Han Gyeol lunges at him in an attempt to grab him while yelling at him angrily to shut his mouth up. Gritting his teeth, Soo Cheol dodges him, and then he kicks him in his stomach with his knee. Laughing at him getting beaten, one of the lackeys pulls out his phone and starts recording the whole thing, while another one of his lackeys cheers him on to hit him harder. Looking at him through his phone, one of his lackeys mockingly says how easily he gave up even after Soo Cheol made fun of his mother. Soo Cheol then grabs his kendo mask and throws it off his head. He then hits him in the head with that pipe he was holding while asking how dare he even try to open his mouth in front of him. Han Gyeol falls to the floor in pain while holding the place he got hit with the pipe. As he keeps getting beaten, he thinks to himself that it is all turning out as he thought it would and that, no matter how one tries, they can never escape their fate. He then calls one of his lackeys to bring him the thing that he asked him for. It's a marker pen. Holding him by his hair, he scribbles on his face and tells him that from the current day onwards, he is his property. He then scribbles up a huge dot on his nose, followed by some whiskers on his cheek while his lackeys make fun of him calling him cute. Wearing a mischievous grin on his face, he tells him to bark. Without saying anything further, he just slaps him, telling him to bark like a dog for him. Soo Cheol continues to slap him over and over again as Han Gyeol doesn't bark and starts thinking to himself as to what he can even do in such a situation, and that nothing is going to change whatever he does or doesn't do. Scared of getting slapped like that continuously, Han Gyeol finally gives in and starts barking to get him to stop. Soo Cheol then turns back to his lackeys and laughs at him, calling him crazy for actually even doing as he told him to. The boy who's been filming all this time tells him that he should wag his tail as well. The other boy beside him tells him that he should upload the video to the group chat later after all this. Wearing an excited smile on his face, Soo Cheol says that he can't hear him anymore and commands him to bark loudly like a horny dog. Afraid of getting slapped again, Han Gyeol follows through and barks even louder. Bowing his head in front of him, Han Gyeol apologizes to him saying that he was wrong and begs him to forgive him. Looking away from Han Gyeol, Soo Cheol talks to his lackeys and tells them that they should return back to class else their homeroom teacher might actually snitch about them skipping classes to their homes. He then turns to Han Gyeol and tells him to come to the storage room after class. With a grin on his face, he says if he knows what would happen to him if he tries to run away and tells him that if he still tries to do that, he should know that he'll kill him if he tries to run away. Soo Cheol and his group walk towards the door while chattering amongst themselves as Han Gyeol continues kneeling there on the floor as Soo Cheol mentions how he's feeling hungry after using his body for a while like that while his lackeys keep sucking up to him. Han Gyeol then finally turns his head towards the kendo mask as the words that Han Song told him that time repeats in his mind. He plays it in his mind as how he told him that if he were to lend him his body, then he'll lend him his strength, and that way he will never have to run away anymore. As Soo Cheol and his group continue to walk towards the door, Han Gyeol calls out to them suddenly. As they turn to face him, they see him wearing that kendo mask and standing straight in front of them. To everyone's surprise, Dong Uk was hiding on the roof while watching all this take place in front of his own eyes. as he sees Han Gyul stand up again. He asks himself as to why he is wearing that mask again, and that it would have all ended if he would have just stayed still. Sucheol suddenly goes ahead and picks up a pipe and asks if he has gone crazy from getting beaten up and if he's planning to mess around again wearing a kendo mask. While cursing at him, Sucheol gets in position to swing the pipe at him. As the pipe is about to hit him, Han Gyul suddenly grabs it midway before impact. Sucheol and Dong-uk both get shocked on seeing him grab that pipe midway like it means nothing. With a straight blank glare in his eyes, Han Seong possessing Han Gyul's body tells him that it's called a homyeon and not a kendo mask. Sucheol continues swinging the pipe at him while Han Gyul dodges each and every strike thrown at him. And while doing so, he says that he has never once in his life drawn his sword against a weak person. He then suddenly stops in his tracks and bends over to pick up a pair of chopstick in between as Sucheol rushes at him, cursing as to what he is babbling about. As Sucheol once again swings at him, this time instead of dodging, Han Gyul blocks it with the chopstick and deflects it smoothly. After deflecting his attack, he hits him in the wrist with his chopstick, saying that strikes should be minimal units lasting less than a second. Seeing himself get hit like that, he mindlessly charges at him while also cursing at him. As he continues to mindlessly swing at him, Han Gyul skillfully dodges every attack while saying how if the sword tip rises, it will cut the torso. With his last swing being his final, as Han Gyul breaks his pipe by smashing it with his foot. With a cold glare in his eyes, he points the chopstick at his throat as he finishes the sentence saying, how if the sword tip lowers, it will cut the neck. With a stupefied look on his face, Sucheol thinks to himself if this person is really the same loser from before that he was bullying around. Holding the chopstick in his hand while striking up an heroic pose, he tells Sucheol that if he dares to even touch him one more time, then he won't let it end with just a warning as today. With his ethereal projection floating out of his body, Han Gyul thinks to himself if it could be that he is having an out-of-body experience. Panicking on seeing the loser they were just making fun of suddenly beat up their boss, Sucheol's lackeys scream out in fear, saying that they should first run away from him as he seems to have completely lost his mind. As Han Gyul thinks to himself about his out-of-body experience and that he doesn't understand what is even going on with him now, he suddenly gets pulled back into his body. As he finally returns to his own body, he thinks to himself how it suddenly feels so heavy being in his own body. As Han Gyul stands there with his head bowed down, Dong-uk suddenly approaches him that he saw him the time he came to the kendo hall and how he thought he was getting beaten up since he was being chased yesterday. In a surprised tone, he asks him if he does kendo. He then tells him to try to not cause trouble if he can. He might end his own athletic career without even being able to use that precious skill. And he then tells him that if he is going to endure, then he should endure it to the end. Suddenly, he starts complimenting him on how those chopstick skill of his was amazing. He then says how he's been doing kendo for a long time but has never seen anything like that. He then asks him which middle school is he from. All while Han Gyul is thinking to himself as to how it was all real, as how he just fought someone and won. Seeing him not respond, Dong-uk reaches his hand towards him asking him if he's okay as he's not responding at all. Before he could even touch him, Han Gyul runs away all while he thinks to himself how he really beat up Sucheol. Excitedly, he keeps repeating it in his head, how he totally destroyed him. Han Gyul is currently in a washroom, splashing his face with water. He then looks at his mirror image and lets out a sigh of relief. With his face wet with water, he thinks to himself how it's unbelievable that he beat Sucheol, and if he really does have that kind of power dormant in him. Suddenly, Han Song speaks up telling him to not misunderstand, as what happened earlier was just him helping him because he felt sorry for him, and that he has already rejected his proposal. He then tells him to take him back to the storage if he has finally returned to his senses. Looking at the mask, Han Gyul listens to him and says that he will. While putting the mask on the shelf, he suddenly notices a crack on it and remembers how it was definitely fine until the day before. Seeing his concern, Han Song tells him to not make a fuss and that it's none of his concern to begin with. With worry visible on his face, he then says how he helped him out. As a reply, Han Song nonchalantly tells him to leave as he's tired and wants to rest. Listening to his words, he simply just bows his head to him and expresses his gratitude by thanking him for helping him out. Dong-uk has finally arrived in the kendo dojo. He starts taking off his shoes as he speaks to himself, saying how they need to recruit kids like that as new members. While taking off his shoes, he suddenly gets startled by Ji Yun's loud tone. As he enters the room, He hears Gi-yeon loudly asking Jae-suk if he's joking when he says that their club will be disbanded if they were to lose against Songnam High. As having entered, Dong-uk suddenly as to what is up with such a tense atmosphere right out of nowhere. Seeing him enter, Jun-young asks him as to why he is so late. As a reply, Dong-uk said that he had something to take care of and asks him as what the current situation is about. Ji-yeon then angrily mentions how the school supports other sport clubs like crazy, even sending them to training camps while they treat the kendo club like trash that they somehow can't wait to get rid of. Jae-suk tells him to calm down and tells him how sport clubs get differential support based on performance. While running off in anger, he mockingly says why the school would even support them when they won't even hire a coach for them. Seeing him run like that, Dong-uk asks him as to where he is going with gritted teeth. He tells him to not try to stop him and that he's going to find the principal or chairman and confront them about this. Suddenly, Jae-seok states a line of School Rule Article 17 saying that all sport clubs of Wangrim High School have autonomy and independence, and that if performance continues to be poor despite the school's support policies, or if the school's reputation is damaged, then disbandment may be considered. Looking at Gi-yeon, he says that in a situation where even complaints are lacking, then there's no way to reverse the school's decision. Irritatedly, Gi-yeon says even if the rules say so, disbandment doesn't make sense at all. And then Jun-young adds up saying how he especially entered this school because of the kendo club. Suddenly, everyone's eyes are drawn to Hae-in as she asks if all they need to do is just win. She then how Jae-suk mentioned it being a 5-person team competition, and she then asks him how he said that she too can participate. With a straight face, he tells her that this match will be a mixed-gender team competition, and as a reply, Hae-in says that she's fine then. Holding up her kendo mask, she says that if it's a decision that can't be reversed, then they just need to win and prevent disbandment instead of whining like a child, and that it's better to do one more swing before going down. With an annoyed expression on his face, Gi-yeon asks her if she's saying that to him. On the other hand, Hae-in calmly replies by saying that she was talking to Jun-young. In a mocking tone, Dong-uk teases him saying how he just got owned and asks him as to why he is being so cowardly unlike himself at all. Suddenly, Dong-uk asks Jun-young if he has Songnam High's match videos and player analysis data. Jun-young replies by saying that he does. He then turns to Jae-suk and tells him that they first need to figure out which players will participate in the team competition and asks him as to doing and if they are going to start training or not. With a straight look on his face, Jae-suk announces that the training starts now while thinking to himself that they just need to win. He then calls out to everyone and tells them to get ready, while he continues thinking to himself that by winning, they will be able to prove the value of the kendo club. Sitting in the classroom all alone, Han-gil thinks back to the time when he defeated his bullies. While looking at his own palm, he thinks to himself how better it would be if it would have been his own power rather than borrowed. In the storage room, Han-gil stands there, with his head bowed as he asks Han-sung to help him get stronger and that he was being too hasty the previous day when he rejected his offer. As a reply, Han-sung says that it was him who was hasty and not him. Han-sung then explains himself saying that the face guard almost broke from just a moment of possession, and that it almost shattered the moment he woke up. With a confused expression on his face, he asks him as to what he means to say. He then tells him that possessing him is like charging a mere 1-volt battery with 100 volts of current. Hearing the word current suddenly, he asks him as to what he means by saying current. He then simply tells him that he's too small of a vessel to contain his power. He continues saying that if he were to possess him one more time in his current state, then both of them will end up exploding. Looking at his trembling hand, he asks him if he's feeling it as well, the price of borrowing his power. He then tells him to live like the way he wanted and that those bullies of his won't be able to touch him for a while. With a weakly determined look on his face, he says that he doesn't know it yet and tells him that if he were to just tell him how to make his body capable of handling not 100 volts but 1000 volts, then he'll do anything to achieve that feat. He then asks him if he's saying that with that weak willpower of his, saying that easily submitting to opponents isn't just a problem of the body. He then tells him to not package his weak heart with such pathetic resolve that he can do anything. He then asks him if he were to stake his life on it, hearing that Han-sung tells him to not say such things so easily. With newfound determination in his eyes, he tells him that it doesn't matter even if he dies. He then says that he can really do anything if he were to just give him a chance to prove himself. With a spark, Han-sung then tells him to prove it. Even if he has to stake his life, if he passes the test he gives him, then he will lend him his power. While climbing up a mountain in heavy rain while wearing his kendo mask, Han Gyeol thinks to himself that he will never give up anymore, and this time he will prove it. That given a change, he can do anything. While climbing up the mountain, his hand suddenly slips and he comes rolling down. As he sits there on the floor, grunting, Han Seong tells him that he should just quit and that a weakling like him could really die this way. As his body trembles from reaching its limit, he stands up saying that he can do it and that he will. As he tightens his helmet, he thinks to himself that this level of pain is nothing compared to all the beatings he took while he was getting bullied, and reassures himself that he can do it. He has now finally reached the topmost point of that mountain he was climbing. Exhausted from that strenuous climb, he lies there on the floor, panting heavily. As he starts to slowly get up, Han Sung suddenly warns him that if he doesn't get up within 5 seconds, then he'll consider it as him giving up. As he finally stands up on his legs, he then points him towards the direction of a cave and tells him that he needs to pass through that cave he sees ahead of him to reach his destination. He then also tells him that he shouldn't go in if he doesn't want to. As a reply, he loudly shouts saying that he will enter it. As he crawls through that cave, he mentions that the path is too narrow. Hearing him complain, Han Sung tells him to not make any excuses about the path and that it feels narrow to him because his body is too stiff. He then finally comes out of the cave and sees a small camp set up. Seeing that Han Seong says how this place is still the same, Han Gyeol then asks him as to what this place is. He then answers saying that this place is his secret training ground that he built near the summit as a child, away from everyone's eyes. He then walks towards that camp set up while he says how no one would know that there's a place like that at the mountain peak. As a reply, Han Sung tells him that he's the first human other than himself to come here and that he should consider it an honor to be able to come here. Han Seong then points him out towards that box covered in a blue cloth and asks if he can see that tarp in the rock crevice on the right. He then tells him that inside it, he should find a wooden sword with his name carved on it. Holding the wooden sword in his hands, he reads up the name Han Sung, written on its handle, while Han Sung tells how this is the sword that he used since he started doing kendo. He then points him in the direction of the half-cut tire stuck on a metal rod and tells him that the striking post he sees in front of him was also made by him, and that even if it's old, it should be no problem for him to practice with. Looking up, he confusedly asks him if that means that he's going to start learning kendo right away. Han Sung straightforwardly replies, saying that he's not even close to what he wants him to actually do. He then tells him to try splitting that tire on the striking post in half. That's his second mission to accomplish. After hitting the tire for a while, he grunts and suddenly the sword falls off his hands. Seeing that, Han Seong says that if he were to continue hitting it so recklessly like that, then his fingers will be crushed way before even the tire splits. As Han Gyeol asks him what he should do to fix that, he then tells him that when gripping the sword, he should hold it upright with his right hand and place his left hand at the end of the handle, and the gap between them should be about 1 fist width. He then tells him to think of it as twisting both hands inward like when wringing a towel. And for the striking technique, he tells him to think of it as swatting down a fly. Hearing that he moves around his sword, asking if he's doing it right. Seeing him, Han Sung tells him that he has to swat them down to catch them. Picturing an electric fly swatter in his head, he says that one can just catch them in midair with electricity, and if they were to swat it down, then it'll break. Hearing him say that, he asks him as to what he is even talking about and tells him that one catches flies by swatting them down. He then simplifies himself, saying that he means that he should strike using wrist snap and not force. Letting out a breath, he thinks to himself how he thought that he could just hit it normally, and that now he knows that there really is a proper method to everything. He then holds his sword up in a swinging position, preparing himself to swing it down, while thinking to himself that he should just try it first, and he will eventually get it right once after trying a couple of times. He then repeats the words that he has to strike through wrist snap and not force. He then finally swings his sword down, hitting the tire. He then looks at his trembling hands and thinks to himself that this is no joke, and that if he were to hit any more, then his palm might tear. He then strikes it again while he debates with himself if he's striking it the correct way, the way it was meant to be done. He then strikes it again while thinking to himself how something feels off to him and fears that he might get scolded if he were to ask. Hitting it once again, he decides to keep hitting it and wait for Han Seong to point out if he makes any mistake. The next day, he is currently taking a nap on his seat after practicing so hard the previous day. Suddenly, one of Jin Seo's bullies calls out to him by his other name, that is, Neckmeat, asking out loud if he's truly here present. The bully keeps calling him, but Jinseo doesn't respond at all in fear. He continues to tremble while the bully finally loudens his voice and says that he called him because he was happy to see him after a while, and then angrily asks him if he's trying to ignore him. As Soo-cheol just passes behind him, the bully turns and asks him if it's about time that they re-educate neckmeat Jinseo once again. Turning his head towards Jinseo, Soo-cheol sees Han-gyul with his head down and gets reminded of the previous day when Han-gyul defeated him. Turning his head back, he silently walks towards the door. Seeing that, the bully then confusedly asks him in a loud voice as to where he is going. Coming up from behind, one of his lackeys tells him to try and read the room. Confused by what he said, he asks him what and why he should do something like that. Jinseo then finally turns his head back, confused, that they are leaving without trying to bully him this time. In the cafeteria, sitting in front of Han-gyul, Jinseo asks him if he thinks that things have been a bit strange lately. Eating his food, Han-gyul asks him as to what he means. Looking at him, Jinseo asks him if remembers how he was Soo-cheol's shuttle at the beginning of the semester because he targeted him. Putting a hand on his mouth, he says that compared to those days, Soo-cheol doesn't even make him do any shuttle work at all. With a cheerful expression on his face, Han-gyul says that it's great that he's not making him do any such sort of work anymore. Continuing to speak with his hand on his mouth, he says that a few days ago when he almost died because of Soo-cheol, some kid mysteriously saved him from his clutches, and ever since then, Soo-cheol hasn't made him do any shuttle work at all. Looking at Han-gyul, he then says that he wasn't able to see his face as that kid was wearing some sort of mask on his face to cover his identity. With a slight bit of worry, Han-gyul says that it's great that he isn't getting bullied anymore, while thinking to himself that it's a good thing that Jinseo didn't notice anything significant about it that might resemble him. It's evening now, and Han-gyul is about to reach 1,000 swings. As he makes his 1,000th swing, he bends his knee while panting heavily. Wiping off his sweat with his hand, he thinks to himself that it's been 10 days and he has not even made a scratch on the tire, and that it looks exactly the same like it did when he first saw it. Supporting himself by putting his hands on his bent knees, he thinks to himself that he doesn't think that his body can take much more. As his eyes are fixated in the striking post, Han Sung asks him if he's right for saying that his legs are giving up and that he can't put any strength into them at all. He then says that it's proof that his body has reached its limits. Panting heavily, Han-gyul wipes it off, saying that he's still perfectly fine. Holding his sword in one hand while preparing himself for another strike, he thinks to himself, repeating those same words once again, that he just has to twist his wrist inward without any shaking. He then holds his sword up, ready to swing down one more time with the snap of his wrists and not force. He then dashes forward, swinging his sword down to strike the tire. With a shocked expression on his face, he lands the strike on the tire. Turning to Han Seong, he excitedly asks him if he saw that strike of his. As a reply, he says that he did, and that it was the most decent swing he has made so far into this training. He then tells him that if one tenses up his body just to hit hard, then not only does he become unable to swing properly, but the sword won't also have any power behind it either, and that only when one relaxes and swings flexibly like a rubber band does, the sword finally starts to become heavy. Looking at him, Han-gyul says that he could have just said that to him from the beginning. Hearing that, Han Sung tells him that relaxing isn't as easy as he thinks, and that it's actually faster to learn by using one's body until the strength naturally drains out. Holding the sword down, he walks towards the striking post while thinking to himself that he has to swing flexibly like a rubber band, putting his body weight into it. With newfound determination, he strikes it once again, and this time he follows all the steps properly. Back in the Wong Rim Kendo Club, Dong-uk is bandaging up Gi-yeon's foot. While he tells that he should rest a bit when he's in this type of condition, he then tells him that his condition is more serious than he thought, hearing that Jun-young concernfully asks him if it is a serious injury. Walking away holding his nose, Dong-uk denies Jun-young's question and says that it's Gi-yeon's foot odor that is serious. Suddenly, Jae-suk tells everyone to gather around, saying that he has something to show them. Sitting beside the laptop, he says that the video that he is going to play is the last year's tournament video of Songnam High School. He then tells them to watch carefully as they don't know who they will face as opponents. Looking at them, he says Songnam High is definitely really strong, and that there won't be a single easy opponent, and then he asks them if any of them has any objections if he were to increase their training volume tenfold. As a reply, all of them shout out saying that they have no objections to it. It has already turned dark, and Han-gyul still continues to hit the tire with his sword. As he falls down to the ground, he thinks to himself that he can't put any strength into his hands anymore, and that it's even hard to grip the sword properly for him. Suddenly, his eyes turn blank as he hears someone call him by the name he used to go by in middle school, that is, King Pushover. It's none other than his middle school bully Shin Gyong-tae, who's standing in front of him laughing at him. With a smirk on his face, he asks him as to what he is doing and if he really thinks that anything will change if he does that. He then tells him that if he is a pushover, then he should live like one, and then mocks him saying that he'll always be his pet bastard for life. In a fit of rage, Han Gyul stands up and starts hitting him with all his power while yelling out to him to die. He then finally lets go of his sword and it falls on the ground as he looks at his blistered palm. Suddenly, Han Song calls out to him from behind and tells him that the foundation of Kendo is the unity of spirit, sword, and body. He then tells him that his will, his sword, and his body must become one to cut down his opponent. With a deep tone, he says further that anger only clouds one's eyes and body, and says that if he wants to cut down his opponent, then he has to abandon all anger and focus on what is in front of him. He then closes his eyes and finally opens them with a calm look in them, while Han Song continues saying that he's no different than when he first met him. And soon after, what he was seeing was the striking post who he was hallucinating to be Gyong-tae. He then stands up in front of the striking post in a perfect stance. Holding his sword up in a striking position, he prepares himself to strike at the tire while thinking to himself that this time, this hit of his will has the oneness of his will, his sword, and his body. He then dashes forward towards it and cuts through it in that one swing. He then turns his head towards Han Song and excitedly shouts out, saying that he finally did. Exhausted after trying for so long, after having cut through the tire, he finally faints to the ground as all that exhaustion comes back to him. Looking at his fainted, exhausted self, Han Song wears a warm, gentle smile on his face and says that, despite how he thought of him to be just a weakling and a coward, he has now made him acknowledge his perseverance. With a sudden jolt, Han Gyul finally wakes up from his deep sleep of exhaustion. As he woke up with a confused expression on his face, Han Seong asked him just how many he was going to sleep for. He then looks at the striking post and murmurs to himself, saying, "How that wasn't a dream." With an excited and joyous tone, he points towards the striking post and asks him if he can see what he did with that piece of tire, and joyfully once again announces that he did it, that he finally cut the tire in half. Looking at the cut tire, Han Song tells him that it was a tire that had already been worn down from decades of wind and rain, and that he shouldn't get excited over splitting one weathered tire. Hearing him say that, he lowers his head down and agrees with him with a faint smile on his face. With a bright shine, Han Seong commends him for doing well, and he then announces that he has passed the test. With a strong voice, he asks him again, and this time officially, if he will become the Kendo King with him. Looking down with a little bit of hesitation showing on his face, he asks if it's really possible for someone like him to become the Kendo King. Looking at Han Gyul, he says that the reason he's been training him all this time wasn't just for his sake alone, and that he can refuse like last time if he wants to, and that the choice is all his to make. Looking up with profound determination in his eyes, he says that he wants to become stronger and that he will do it with him. That is, become the Kendo King. Hearing that, Han Song then says that from then on he will make him strong like he's raising his own disciple, and that it might be harder than the training that they have done so far, and he then asks him if he can handle it. With an excited and confident look in his eyes, he says yes, saying that he will do it. While scratching his head, he then suddenly asks him if he should call him master from this day forth. Scratching his chin, Han Song replies by saying that he can do as he likes. Hearing that, he bows his head and says that he understands and adds up a master at the end of his sentence. Han Song then asks him if he can agree to follow and trust him in any situation, and as a reply, Han Gyul says that he will. Han Song then tells him that the first step to becoming the Kendo King would be for him to join the Kendo Club. With a surprised look on his face, he asks back if he wants him to join the Kendo Club back at his school.